Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another video, and this time I want to talk about healing and just a lot of the general things about healing that I find that a lot of people just don't really think about, and a lot of things that are actually kind of difficult to do and keep in mind during the course of a fight. So I'm just going to go through all of those things, and then I want to do a part 2 where I'm going to go and do like the silver proving grounds or whatever, just to show off a couple of things that I wanted to talk about and show them kind of in use in a relaxed way where I can actually still think without frantically going, oh my god, don't die! So, yeah. Now, first off, on the ultimate list is cooldowns. Healers, I would have to say, probably the most important class when it comes, the most important role for using cooldowns. Now, I know that the tanks and DPS might disagree with me. No, you need the cooldowns for those too, that's true. But with healers, they are the most underused cooldowns in the game, I feel. And they're also probably the most important for healers. You know, healer cooldowns just absolutely... But the difference between using them and not using them is phenomenal. So I want to talk about the kind of situations in which you want to use them and a couple of tricks that will help you use your cooldowns more. Now the first off trick is Get Tell Me When. I have got guides on it, check out the description below for links, but Get Tell Me When, that is this thing over here right above my little portrait. You can put that wherever you want, and you can put whatever you want on there. I've got a pretty thorough guide, if I do say so myself, on that. The whole thing with that is this is to monitor your buffs as well, but more talking about cooldowns now. You want to make sure that you are actually using things as they come up and in the right situation, so you know, hey, the tank's taking a lot of damage, I have pain suppression available to use on the tank to make him take less damage, therefore I don't have to heal him as much, which means that I end up spending less mana, which means I have more mana to spend somewhere else. Or maybe the tank is taking more damage than you can heal, you use pain suppression, and guess what? They didn't die, and they would have, which is the difference between a wipe and not a wipe, which is pretty huge. So that's one of the things. You've got pain suppression there, but not just your cooldowns defensive-wise, but I mean you've also got your shorter cooldowns, like Inner Focus. You want to be using that pretty much on cooldown. As a priest, I'm mainly talking about priests, but this applies to other healer specs as well. I mean, you've got your shamans, your druids. You want to be making sure to be using your totems and your innervates and all of your kind of really, really powerful cooldowns. If you went through an entire fight and you didn't use those cooldowns, something's wrong. Like, really, really wrong. You need to be using those cooldowns. They will make you so much more effective. Now, with the mana cooldowns, generally you want to be using that, or those, around about the time that you reach, like, maybe 80% mana for druids. I think that Innovate restores 20% of your mana, so using it before you're below 80% is going to waste some of it. But basically, as soon as you start hitting around about 80% mana, it's time to start thinking about using some mana cooldowns. So for priests, you've got like your Mindbender or your Shadow Fiend. I like the Mindbender quite a lot. You want to make sure that you've got him there so that you can see when he's ready and use him as soon as he's ready, and it will get you so much mana. Oh my goodness. Then if you're a Blood Elf, you've got your thing like an Arcane Torrent, and also your trinkets. You can monitor your trinket cooldowns, like this thing, whatever it is. The Soothing Talisman of the Shadowpan Assault, and yes, I still have the Ghost Down Dragonling. No trinkets want to drop for me. Don't know why. But you want to be making sure that you're using those cooldowns. You want to make sure to use your cooldowns, your trinkets, your Arcane Torrents, everything to get every scrap of mana. Just do a fight, and go and do a Proving Grounds without using any mana cooldowns at all, and then do one when you're using them on cooldown. See the difference. It's pretty massive. It's just pretty huge. Anyway, moving on. You've also got some spells. There are different types of potions that I'm going to talk about as a cooldown here. Now, you've got your normal mana potion, and you've got your potion of concentration. Now, your normal mana potion instantly restores like 30k mana, whereas the potion of focus restores 45k mana, but it takes you out of commission for a while. Now, if you think about it, in most fights, there's usually a spot where there isn't really that much healing that needs to be done, and you know the other healers can probably cover for you during that while you take a break to take the potion of focus. And that's generally the time where you want to be using that potion of focus. You know, the time when no adds have spawned, or there's like a few seconds where nothing is happening, and you can just quickly down one of those potions. Now the same thing applies to abilities like your Hymn of Hope, and abilities like Tranquility as well. It's, with Hymn of Hope, you want to be using it during a period where there's not much happening and you won't have to move. Because it's a channel, if you have to move, you've just wasted a very long and powerful cooldown. And it's powerful for your allies as well. Keep that in mind. The Hymn of Hope, incredibly powerful. So you want to be using that during a down period, no damage is taking place, and you want to be using it when people need mana as well, and when you don't have to move and all of that kind of stuff. Abilities like Tranquility, however, big healing AoE raid cooldowns that you channel, and everyone's health bars just go, pachoom, look at us, we're big and shiny. And you want to be using those during parts of the fight where there's intense heavy AoE damage. Generally, bosses will have a stack-up kind of phase, where everyone's stacking up and just taking absurd amounts of damage. You've got Melkorok, for example, using a frontal cone attack, and just doing absurd amounts of damage to the entire raid. Unbelievably good time to use abilities like Tranquility. Use them then! And that kind of a thing where people are stacked up and taking tons of damage, that's when you want to be using abilities like Power Word Barrier, for example. You put down a giant dome and everyone inside takes less damage. That's going to help you a lot. That's going to help your entire raid a lot. Use those cooldowns. Then you've also got some cooldowns that kind of need to be used in advance, I would say. And that's, for example, you've got your Spirit Shell. Now, what Spirit Shell does is it turns all of your heals, well, most of your heals, into creating an absorption effect, so shielding people, instead of actually healing them. So what you want to do, everyone's at full health, you're in a kind of a down period, and something insane is about to happen. The boss is about to go into his, oh my goodness, let's do ridiculous amounts of damage to people phase. Now he can do the damage, it doesn't really matter. With Spirit Shell, for example, who he does the damage to doesn't actually matter. If he does it to the tank, you heal the tank in advance. If he does it to the raid, then you'll heal the raid in advance. So what you'll do, for example, is you know it's about to enter the phase, you've got like a couple of seconds, you'll pop Spirit Shell, and then you'll probably pop Power Infusion as well, and then you'll just start pumping heals into things. Probably not with Flash Heal, to be honest, but you'll be using Penance, you'll be using Greater Heal, you'll be using Renew, you'll just be pumping huge Absorb Shield into people. And then when that thing happens and everyone's taking a huge amount of damage, your shields will be soaking a huge amount of damage. You've basically pre-healed everyone, which is just unbelievably good. So good. You can also do that kind of in advance. Priests are kind of a little trick for you. In fights with a heavy tank damage, what you want to know is which tank is going to be starting off with the boss. You pop your Spirit Shell during that countdown, and you pump some heals into the tank who's going to be tanking the boss and taking absurd amounts of damage. Guess what? You're going to be healing the tank before the fight has even started, basically. And the nice thing is, of course, that your regen outside of combat is higher than your regen inside of combat. So healing and spending mana outside of combat is actually kind of better than spending it inside of the combat. If that makes any sense, just do it. Use Spirit Shell, heal people ahead of time. It's bloody fantastic, I promise. And then you've got you've got abilities like Prayer of Mending, things you want to be using on cooldown. Go and use Tell Me When, and add-ons like it. Make sure that you are using your cooldowns on cooldown. Or not on cooldown, but generally on cooldown. You want to be using them quite a lot, unless you know that there's going to be something coming up ahead. For example, if you know there's going to be a phase where a huge amount of damage is going to happen, don't use your Tranquility. Save it for the phase where everything goes completely and utterly nuts, and you want to save it for that, and then pop it as soon as that happens. Know the fight's ahead of time. That's another one of the things about the healing. Now, the same kind of thing goes with, and now I want to go into the next kind of topic, which will be tooltips. Read your tooltips, guys. Know what your spells actually do. I promise it'll help you. I'll just give you an example that some of you may or may not know. The Prayer of Healing for Priests, okay? How many of you think that you can just spam Prayer of Healing in like a 25-man group and it'll be healing like the lowest health people? Because it won't. It will be healing the people inside of your party if they are in range, okay? So the other 20 people not going to get healed. If you're standing with, a whole bunch of people, you're standing with 20 people, the other 4 people in your party are on the other side of the room, and you're spamming Prayer of Healing on yourself, you're going to be healing yourself. No one else. So you want to be casting Prayer of Healing on people where their groups are taking damage, and you want to be healing the group. That's just an example of the tooltip. Not really talking about the spells so much as read your tooltips. Know what they actually do. And then that will also kind of help. you knowing when to use your spells as well. I mean, if you just, before you even start healing, just go and put all your spells in your bar, and then read the tooltips one by one, and just know what they all do. And then you're going to know, and just while you're reading those tooltips, you're going to see what situations should I be using these spells in. Oh, Penance is like a super fast, pretty intense heal. Maybe I should be using that, especially when like a tank's just taken a heavy blow and he needs to be healed up pretty quickly. I can just Penance him, and then I can pop a shield on him, and then I can hit him with a Prayer of Mending, and then I can renew him. And then basically the next time he gets hit because of the Prayer of Mending, he's going to get healed, and he's getting healed because of the renew. And the shield is blocking the damage, meaning that his health bar is going to go up, and then the shield is going to fall off, and then his health bar will go down, and you can re-shield him. And it's just, you know, you want to know what your spells actually do. You want to be using utility spells, you know, you want to know when to use them. Like, you want to make sure that you've got fear ward on things when things are getting feared. And then either you don't get feared or the tank doesn't get feared, and you just save a whole lot of trouble that way. Just know what your spells do. And that thing with the Prayer of Healing, I didn't know about that for a while, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't, that's one of the reasons I used it as an example. Now with the mana management, this again, you know, you want to be using those cooldowns. Your mana cooldowns, use them! It's so important to use those cooldowns. You won't need nearly as much spirit if you're using your cooldowns properly. And now, with the mana management as well, you also kind of want to know in advance how the fight's going to go, if possible. You know, if it's a raid boss fight, make sure you know the tactics quite well. And the reason for this is, generally, when I'm healing, what I'll know is, let's take an example like Galactus. You know, you've got the normal kind of phase where you're fighting a whole bunch of adds. And then you've got a really, really intense phase where you're going to need a ton of mana to burn through because everyone's stacking up and everything's going nuts, everyone's taking so much damage, and that's when you're going to want a whole bunch of mana. So you're going to be kind of burning through a lot of your mana before that last phase with that intense healing. And then I'm going to want to kind of pull back a little bit, be a lot more conservative, be using my cooldowns, get my mana as close to full as possible before that phase, you know, happens. Don't just slack off the healing completely, because then the other healers are going to get screwed, and that's not cool. But, you know, you want to just be a lot more conservative. You can be very, very aggressive when you know that you can be aggressive. You know, be aggressive during the periods where lots of damage is happening, especially if you know that there's a lull coming up where you're going to be able to regen that mana back, and then another aggressive period is going to happen for you to spend that mana. Just think in advance, am I going to need mana in like the next 2 minutes? How much mana am I going to need? You know, can I know that in advance? I mean, if you went and you were like being super awesome and you were healing and you were thinking that at this constant damage rate, you know, you're going to hit exactly as the fight ends, that would be perfect actually, because if you have mana higher than 0 when the fight has instantly died, it's kind of wasted mana, because what are you going to do with it? The fight's over. You know, you should have been using that during the fight. But you see, the fights aren't always going to be at a consistent rate of damage. So you want to make sure that you're going to have some mana to burn through if there is a phase where you're going to have to burn through that mana. Because if you are, like, if you have like 5k mana left for the last phase of Galactus, where everything goes nuts, you're so screwed. So in trouble. So just make sure that you know the fights in advance, and that will help you with your mana management. And it also kind of depends on the spells you're using. Don't spam the fast healing spells because, oh my goodness, I want to look so awesome on the meter, because that is such a waste of mana. If you're going because you're using your flash of light and your flash heal and your healing surges, you're going because you're being silly. And you shouldn't be using such ineffective heals. Flash heals aren't there so that you can try and nip in before the other healers heal that person. Your flash heals are there because, oh my goodness, if I don't heal this person in the next half a second, they're going to die. That's what flash heals are for. They are incredibly inefficient. Okay, they cost so much mana for what they heal for. You want to be using spells that don't cost quite so much mana. Now, with Power Word Shield, for example, ironically, it's actually quite efficient. If you can use Power Word Shield on someone when you know they're going to be taking a huge amount of damage, beautiful. It's an incredibly efficient spell. Well, at least I think it is. It's absolutely beautiful. If you know that someone's about to get hit insanely hard, shield them before they get hit. And just watch the beautiful healing happen. Or watch them not take any damage, which is, of course, nice. But if you're using Power Word Shield on people, and it's still on them, and it falls off, wasted heals. Overhealing. Total waste. Don't do that. I mean, if you're just shielding people because you're shielding people, that's just silly. You want to be shielding people when you know that they are going to be taking heavy, heavy damage. Though you might not always do that, because healing is about keeping people alive, so it's not just about, you know, making sure you don't overheal. If someone's on 10% health, you might shield them because if they take another hit, they're dead, and you need something to try and act as a buffer against them dying. So you might instantly shield them and then pump some flash heals into them. You might not know that there's some heavy damage incoming on that person, but unless you know there isn't, don't take the chance, because you don't want them to die. So just a lot of it comes from knowing the fight in advance. A lot of mana management is using your cooldowns, and a lot of mana management is just not being silly. Don't use insanely expensive spells when there's just no reason for it. You know, just don't waste a flash heal on someone who's at 99% health. Just don't do it. Why? Why bother? Put a hot on them or something if you really want to. And that's pretty much it for mana management, really. A lot of it just comes with knowing the fights and a bit of practice. And then with the positioning, you want to make sure that you've got a lot of people in range of you. If you're healing the tanks, be in range of the tanks. Don't run across the other side of the room, because, hey, the tanks might be on full health, but what happens if they fail to parry 2 successive blows? They're probably dead on some of the insanely hard-hitting bosses, especially if their gear isn't that great. So you want to make sure if you're healing the tanks, you're actually in range of the tanks. And with the positioning, there's also like a couple of weird things, like, for example, Halo. Halo heals quite nicely the further away people are from you, so you don't want to stand like on someone's toes if you want to heal them with Halo. You want to stand a reasonable distance away, but still far enough away from them to get hit by the heal. You want to be making sure to watch where you're standing, do not die. You know, I find that, for example, when I'm using Healbot, I like for it to be like where it is now. A lot of the screen I have kind of positioned here with info that I need to see, because the main reason is I kind of want to be able to heal people while looking at myself, because if I'm standing in fire, that's bad and I should move. That's basically the main thing with positioning. If you're standing in fire, that's bad and you should move. Also, if you know that there's something going to happen that you can move in advance for, then that's nice. But as long as there isn't some kind of penalty for doing that, make sure you're not going to screw up the raid because you were just trying to get somewhere in advance and you shouldn't have. Some of the nice things is maybe when things are going to stack up, if you stack up 3 seconds earlier, maybe you can get some heals off. What was during a lull phase, you get there 3 seconds earlier, and that way when everyone's running in during the chaotic phase, you're able to sit down and heal, which is quite nice. And while you're running, also make sure you're using, you know, your instant cast heals can be quite nice to use during that kind of time. And with the dispelling, good grief. So many people just don't dispel. You might look pretty on the meters when you're pumping heals into someone because they're taking insane amounts of dot damage, but you see, it costs a lot more to have to heal someone for 1,000,000 damage than to use one spell to dispel that dot dealing 1,000,000 damage. Okay? Some of those dots last a really long time and they're dealing insane amounts of damage. Instead of pumping heals into that person and going you could just use a single spell to make sure that that damage never happens. Do you know how much that will save you? Make sure that people are dispelled. If you need to, add your dispel to the cooldown tracker so that as it's off cooldown, you can dispel people if you need to. Priests, be careful with your mass dispel. Unless you're dispelling at least 5 people, it probably isn't worth it, because it's insanely expensive and you want to be dispelling like around about 5 people for it to be really worth it. And that's really it for the spells. Just use them. Add it to the cooldown tracker if you need to. And a couple of macros and add-ons for you guys. I'm not entirely sure what other people would be using for macros. Generally when I'm healing, I don't tend to like using macros. But there is one macro that you might like to use, and that is just the stop casting. I'm going to put it in the description, so you can go and put on your macro for the stop casting. Basically what this does is if I'm casting something, like say I'm casting Greater Heal on someone, I can instantly just use the stop button. Like you probably have it bound to, let's say, 1, right? So you'll be healing someone, and then you want to be pressing 1 because that person isn't the priority heal anymore, and you desperately need to heal someone else, and it's faster to just be healing someone and then just go 1 rather than move or something. I find that move is a bit slower, that I tend to use move because it's just easier. Don't use jump. I know some people use jump. The trouble is that while you're in the air, you can't heal anyone. You may as well have finished your cast because you're just completely wasting time. So if you're going to be interrupting a cast, just move like a little bit, and then it'll interrupt the cast. Or use a stop casting macro. Check the description for that. Now let's put that back, and get rid of that, because I don't actually want it. And of course, if you're using heal bots, or if you want Tell Me When, I've got links to the guides in the description, a whole bunch of great healing add-ons. I would say Tell Me When and Healbot would be my 2 add-ons that if I were going to heal, I would want those 2. Like if I had nothing else, I would probably want Tell Me When and Healbot to heal. Whether you want Healbot, or if you want Click, or if you want Grid, or if you want Voodoo, or if you want whatever, as long as it works for you, go and get one of those. Practice with it, get used to it. I like Healbot, I find it's very user-friendly, it's easy to just pick up and use, and it doesn't really interfere with me when I'm trying to do other things than healing. You know, I find that a lot of the other add-ons kind of, you have to set up your whole UI around healing, and I don't like doing that because I like to tank and heal as well. So I like Healbot quite a lot. And for the glyphs and talents, guys, make sure that you're swapping them around. Swap them around for fights that need them. You know, Halo might not always be the best talent for every fight, so swap it out for something else that might be the best for that fight. Swap out your glyphs. If you're not using Renew, having the glyph that makes Renew more powerful, waste of time. If you're not using Penance while moving, having that Penance glyph, complete waste of time. Of course, these are just examples, and in the future it might not be something that's necessary, or these specific things might not be something that's even in the game, but it's just something to keep in mind. If there's a glyph that you aren't using, maybe you should get rid of it and replace it with something that you actually will use. Just even if it's a tiny improvement, it's still an improvement. And the same thing goes for talents. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, post them in the comment section below, and I'm now going to go and do the kind of playthrough where I'm going to be talking about stuff while I do the Proving Grounds. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. Cheerio.